that entire, like, weird-ass CGI sequence where he explodes into bubbles
Right.
and then gets attacked by other bubbles.
Man, I'm sorry I didn't see that.
I said it before and I'll say it again. Life moves pretty fast. You don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.
Never fear change. Life is too short for fear. Chase what is desired.
I can do this all day.
Would you mind identifying what you are?
We're the best friends squad.
That's what we call ourselves. Sort of like a team.
Welcome to the rodeo. Ladies and gentlemen, please sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride.
This is the way.
I have spoken.
Welcome to the Skiffy and Fanty Show.
When you want to hand wave a plot and you need a giant inflatable foam rubber one to do it.
I'm Sean.
I'm Alex.
I'm David.
And today we're here for Torture Cinema. We are talking about a film that our Patreon supporters selected. Children of the Corn 2, The Final Sacrifice, a inappropriately named film because it in fact was not The Final Sacrifice. This film was followed by several other films, unfortunately.
That's just... Ugh.
I mean, it's the first film I think we've watched where the title explicitly lied to us.
Yeah. I mean, it was The Final Sacrifice in the theaters, for what it's worth, I guess.
Oh, this one actually went to theaters? Because
Yeah.
I was assuming it was direct-to-video, because...
It certainly reeks of that, but it did have a theatrical release. It actually made money.
Because the one I rented, it definitely, like, it had been... The aspect ratio was like a TV aspect ratio, so I just... ugh.
So this film made about $7 million in the theater.
That was $7 million more than it deserved.
I mean, to be fair, they probably didn't spend all that much making it.
No, I mean, that's a pretty good return, I think. And adjusting for inflation, that's, for a piece of shit like this, that's not bad.
Not bad at all. Well, thanks so much, Patreon supporters, for selecting this film. You picked it from a poll of sequels to films we have covered on this show. Because as I recall, last year we covered Children of the Corn, the first one. And I believe, were both of you present for that one as well?
Yes, we were.
I think that's why you brought us back for this. Or maybe it's just because you hate us. That is
Look,
also possible.
I can neither confirm nor deny which one of those is the true story. But before we get into talking about what this film is about, and eventually David's lecture about the 90s of horror, which will be at least 25 minutes of this episode, we need to get into what we're drinking. And so I will throw that to you first, Alex. What are you drinking?
So I am drinking what I will admit right now is perhaps the whitest beer ever brewed, which is... It is a nitro pumpkin spice latte from the Breckenridge Brewery.
Of course you did. Of course.
I
Wow.
mean, it is described on the can as smooth cascading coffee milk stout brewed with pumpkin and spices.
Nice. What about you, David?
Well, I'm having a nice Santa Margarita Chianti, but given that I just checked and this film's budget was $900,000, and so this film is in fact considerably more profitable than just about any Marvel film you can name, I don't think any of us are drinking anything hard enough.
Jesus.
Oh, David. That's just worrisome. Well, okay. All right, and then as for myself, I am drinking a Screwdriver with a little bit of peach schnapps in it, mostly because I didn't think this film deserved me to be classy. So
No.
I am not going to. I could have gone with Halloween themed. I have in the past done things like, for example, the Bloody Pumpkin, which is a delicious drink, and I have done episodes on that. But no, this film does not deserve it. In fact, this film doesn't even involve pumpkins, so it does not deserve pumpkin-themed stuff. How dare you, Alex?
Well, I was going to say, actually, I had the option of drinking a much more appropriately themed beer because there is currently available, oh god, I can't remember which brewer it's from, but there is an Olathe Corn Ale, which is super tasty, and this movie does not fucking deserve it. But this is my first beer that I've had since I started recovery from surgery, so I decided to make it a good one, even if this movie really, really doesn't deserve it.
Well, look, I think that's a totally fair way to spend your time with alcohol. And, we don't always have to do themed drinks for this, even though this is our Halloween special. And as you aptly pointed out, this film does not deserve the extra love, given that all three of us have watched it. And even though I have promised people that David considers this to be one of the greatest films ever made and will in fact give us a lecture precisely about that. That'll be the second 25 minutes of this episode. David has been preparing these lectures for a long time, but academia will not let him give these lectures. So I decided we would use this episode
with good
precisely
reason
for that.
David, you iconoclast.
Yeah. So, but on the
Heterodox.
subject...
There we go, that's the word.
So on the subject of this film, Children of the Corn 2, The Final Sacrifice from 1993, I have been elected by way of losing a D20 roll. I failed my perception check, so I have been forced to give you the synopsis of this film. And so I will do the best to give you a synopsis of what Children of the Corn 2, The Final Sacrifice is like. So Children of the Corn 2, The Final Sacrifice is set in Hemingford, Nebraska, a town near the original Gatlin, from which Children of the Corn is derived. This opens pretty clearly with the surviving children from the original massacre being essentially kind of rounded up, and there being news reports about cult activity. All these kids are kind of they're being medically checked and put on a big bus, and it's a big to-do. Everybody's talking about, oh, there's this big cult, and they murdered all their kids, and there's one little old lady
No,
who's
the
just
kids murdered their parents. The kids murdered their parents.
Right. The kids murdered their parents. Oh, so bad. And there's a little old lady who's like, they're all evil. What are you all doing? And all the other adults, for reasons we still don't quite understand, are like, but they were just kids. Let's just let them in our homes. It's all good times. And the rest of us sitting at home are going, well, that's a bad fucking idea. Why don't you just send them maybe to, I don't know, a place where they might get help? But no, we're going to send them to mom and pop's bed and breakfast while little old lady is like, I love my cats and they're evil. And as predicted...
And I'm literally going to move my entire fucking house out of this town.
Right,
What?
yeah. Little old lady both hates these kids because they're evil and also has decided to move her own house. That is a plot point that will come up later that I won't say now. But basically, you have the main characters played by Terrence Knox, who plays John Garrett, and Paul Scherer, who plays Danny Garrett, his son, or estranged son, I suppose you could say, who is a tabloid reporter, John Garrett is, and decides by showing up quite late that he's going to cover this story. He's going to stay in the bed and breakfast with the cute lady, who also happens to have taken in one of the evil children. And predictably, as they sort of do a little, I wouldn't call it investigative reporting, but attempt to uncover some of the story, the children start talking to the alien monster, whatever, that lives in the corn. Their cult starts up again, and they plan to murder all of the people again. But there's also some plot involving the sheriff and a number of other major town folk people who are secretly using some sort of corn poison / mold, which is discovered by the magical Indian who's in this. We'll talk about later, I'm sure. That's all going on as well. So there's like conspiracy to affect the entire world through corn. But also the children are evil because they're in a cult and they want to kill all of the kids. And then there's a bit of altercation at the end in which the magical Indian character dies 57 times, but also continues to resurrect until he doesn't anymore. And the nuclear family is finally reconstituted through corn.
Sean, you just made the movie sound way more action-packed, interesting, and sensible than it actually is.
I concur.
I forgot to mention 90% of this is just shots of cornfields.
Never has so little happened in a movie at such length.
I mean, you're not wrong.
I did want to note, like, you mentioned the children are being medically checked when they're being put on the bus to be taken to the next town. And the competence of this medical check is, like, the sort of, hallmark for the idiotic adults in the next town over. Because literally, you just have this old dude bending down and having them all say, well, he sticks a tongue depressor on their mouth, and then he's like, okay, you're fine. Like, so I don't know if he's checking for razor blades or what.
He gives them a sucker.
Oh, and he gives them a sucker.
So basically, it's actually a hard-hitting documentary of certain governmental responses to COVID-19.
Oh, God, it really is. Oh, my God, this film was predicting the present.
And you notice they killed the oldest people first.
They really did. They went, oh, man, they just love killing the moldies.
And they killed the Native American, thus, symbolizing the way we've been treating BIPOC communities, and the person living at the end is the sort of like plastic white guy who could very well go be a senator from Nebraska.
And you have the whole generational conflict, which is implied, where it is implied that the kids are killing all the adults because they've destroyed the world. So there's this whole sort of boomer, millennial the thing going through as we revisit the generation struggles of the 60s back again in the 90s and later.
And the true horror of this movie is in fact that the boomer, symbolized by this sleazy tabloid writer that fucks the lady who runs the bed and breakfast, that he actually gets to win in the end, and his son betrays his generation and instead throws his lot in with his dad.
I just want to note that you all gave me shit for making the synopsis sound so much better, but then you all went into this big old social critique because you guys are both obviously writing a book together on the greatness of this film, and I hate you both for giving me shit.
I really, really, really hate myself right now.
We're just doing a sort of like woke reading of Children of the Corn 2, The Final Sacrifice.
I mean, sure. I mean, you could definitely make these interesting comparisons and analyses of this film, but let's be honest, they probably weren't thinking about this while making this film, and it certainly is a film that flops pretty darn hard in almost every aspect.
Bad.
In fact, I would argue there's only one interesting death in the entire film.
There was one scene that I actually enjoyed. One scene.
Is it the one I'm thinking of? Is it one of your likes? Is that why?
Well, I have come up with 2 likes for this movie, shockingly.
Wow.
It's the one that I mentioned on Twitter that actually made me laugh out loud, loudly enough that it scared my cats at 1 hour and 5 minutes into the movie.
It is a pretty great moment, so yeah.
All right. Well, before we get into our likes and dislikes, I just wanted to let everybody know that this podcast is sponsored by the Nebraska Corn Coalition. This is pretty important.
Go Huskers!
Yeah, go Huskers. It's really fantastic that they offered to sponsor us by giving us each a bushel of corn, which I don't know if that's actually what they come in. I just called them that, so we probably will lose our sponsorship for incorrectly using the terminology, but I don't care. But so thank you, Nebraska Corn Coalition, for supporting us. If you want to find out more about them, you can go to nebraskacorncoalition.com. You can also go to www.nebraska.gov/corn will kill us all, which is another website that Nebraska's been keeping for a number of years. So do make sure to learn about corn. It's important. Corn was the original thing. Founding Fathers obviously originally made corn out of Jesus. So, yeah.
The Thanksgiving story they won't tell you.
So the cornholy jokes just come out now, right? And
yeah, sorry, I just had to do it. Because this is such a corn. It's a corn-fed film. It's so full of corn. It's so much corn, and even when they talk about corn in this, and they're trying to sound like smart about how much they know about corn, and I'm just sitting here going, what has happened? They don't know anything about corn. Like, I looked up the disease that's on the corn because I was like, maybe that's a real thing, and it does have some sort of psychosomatic effect. And I was like, what did he say? Like aspergilla or some, I don't know, whatever the fuck he said, right? And so I looked it up, and it doesn't exist. The thing he's talking about, they just made it up, and I was like, that just makes me even more depressed.
I mean, do you think shit's gonna get moldy in Nebraska?
Well, and I'm sort of wondering, would corn just kept in a barn still look like corn you could sell after a year?
No. Doesn't it dry? It dries out, right? Like after, like if you leave a husk of corn, like if you just leave an ear there, eventually it starts to dry and it withers all the moisture leaves.
Or it just turns into sort of moldy, rotten crap after about a week in my cupboard. So I'm just trying to see how you'd. Why am I even asking a question about how they're going to sell the corn? Once again, I've managed to annoy myself.
So we're having severe issues with the scientific accuracy of this film. Is what
Children of the fucking Corn too.
Look, it's really important for us to note, you're also talking about Canadian corn, which is different from American corn.
Okay, yeah. No, that explains it all. Thank you. I feel better now.
You really should. Honestly, it's shocking that you don't know this, given that we used to fight a war between the United States and Canada over corn.
Yeah.
Yes, the Corn Wars.
Yeah.
That was the War of 1836, by the way, in case people don't know. Google it.
Yeah, definitely. Go, just pause the podcast, go Google it now.
We've all learned something. Yes.
Oh, God. Anyway, yeah, so about this movie. So let's get into our likes and dislikes, since we all hate this film with fiery passion, which is why we're making a bullshit about it instead. We're going to start with likes and end with dislikes. And so, Alex, I will throw the first like to you. Give us your first like, please.
Okay, so I actually do have 2 likes, and I'll mention one of them now, but if my other one doesn't get mentioned, I reserve the right to mention it before we go into the dislikes.
Okay.
So, my ultimate like is indeed the scene that made me actually laugh out loud, even though I have a feeling that was not actually the intent of the scene, but I did get some enjoyment out of it, more than I got out of the entire rest of the movie. And it's when boring teenage kid is gonna fuck the boring teenage girl, and they go to the cornfield for some reason. And they're, like, getting it on, and she's like, oh, there's something under my back, and he reaches behind her back, because he's being courteous, which good on him, and pulls out a fucking severed hand. And then they both scream and, like, get up and start looking around, and there's, like, fucking, like, rotted corpses all around them that they somehow didn't notice until this moment, because they are the dumbest people in all of creation.
Well, after all, this is a couple who the girl has an outdoor shower, fully dressed, including shoes and socks, and when they go for a swim, he apparently swam in his jeans. So
that's not gonna change.
Yeah,
seems to be par for the course for them.
Yeah, they are not the sharpest knives in the drawer, and that moment was really funny, even though, like, the soundtrack and the sound design were being like, no, this is scary and startling, and I was like, no, it's not, fuck off.
Yeah,
this is hilarious.
It is not at all. It also, there's just a lot about these two characters that don't make a whole lot of sense. Like, so I get him. I understand him perfectly.
They were basically written by a random word generator, is like how their lines were written, I think.
Like, there's a moment when she basically says to him, like, oh, I want you to take me with you when you go to New York. And it's like they've only met for all of 13 seconds.
It's in full stalker mode when she says that, too. It's
yeah.
You're going to take me with you. I thought there was going to be a twist that she was a member of the cult, but no.
No, he has to rescue her from the cult because the movie wants us to think that he joined the cult, even though there's not a lot to support that.
There's like nothing. Like,
yeah.
I mean, character is a thing this movie doesn't worry about. I mean, I will note, in fairness to this terribly written young woman, I mean, if I lived in Nebraska, I would probably ask the first person I met to get me the fuck out of Nebraska.
Well, specifically, if you lived in the part of Nebraska that's within easy driving distance of a town where all of the teenagers murdered all of the adults, on top of which those teenagers have now moved to the town you live in. Like...
And that town is apparently like a 10-minute walk from the other one. The geography is very, very vague.
I mean, Nebraska is just one giant cornfield. It's fine. It's like, you know, it's kind of like shadow stepping where you corn step. You just like go from one cornfield to another and it doesn't matter. I'm just saying that even without the murder cult, Nebraska is terrible enough. Hey, everybody who's listening from Nebraska, all one of you, I love you even though you live in Nebraska.
I do have to second you, Alex, on that scene because that was a genuinely entertaining moment. It was beautiful. You know, it like I said, it didn't make any kind of sense, but it looked great. And it's like, okay, good. I just saw a crop circle with rotting bodies everywhere. It's kind of like a still shot from some Lucio Fulci zombie movie where we didn't actually get to see the zombies come out of the earth. But hey, we've got something here. It's and we're given so precious little that I think you're absolutely right to hold on to it like it's gold.
It was so funny. Like, I'm just sitting there going, did no one notice the smell? Or were they like, ooh, this smells like a great place to hump? I don't know.
Because corn's not prickly.
No. It is well known for being very comfortable.
There's a barn with presumably like nice fluffy bales of hay they could be on.
Or her favorite place that they were just at.
Right.
Hay is also not actually that comfortable to sit on.
I mean, it's probably not, but if you're from Nebraska, like, I guess neither corn nor hay would be particularly uncomfortable.
You're actually just made out of leather and,
Right.
have no soul.
Well, that's where all Nebraska children are born. They're born in either a cornfield or a hay bale.
It is known.
Yeah. That's why they're so into Jesus there.
Oh my God, that fucking church in the no. Happy thing, teenagers screwing in a field full of dead bodies because they were too dumb to notice them. Happy place.
It's so silly. Yeah. Well, all right. Well, David, what about you? What's your like, sir?
Well, I'm going to go with the COD Omen soundtrack that kicked in during all of the murder scenes. And I'll grant the film this much over its predecessor, which takes place after all the murders have happened, except for the opening scene. Here we get to see the wiping out of the adults taking place, and it's accompanied, and though this will be connected to dislikes, there's no consistency into how any of this happens, but whenever people are being killed, whether it's involving a house, gasoline, or mysterious gopher god induced twister, we get this shouting soundtrack, and it worked great for Jerry Goldsmith in The Omen. It's not as good here, but it was at least it was an orally interesting moment, which again, given the acres of tedium, you got to hang on to those things. Plus, there was people dying gruesomely to go along with the music, so that's as close as I could find to a happy place in the movie.
I mean, the soundtrack was really trying its absolute hardest. Like, bless.
Yeah, it wasn't going to do half measures.
I mean, it certainly was. I mean, I would admit it's not my like, but the opening credits I thought were, the music and the setting and the mood there I thought was pretty solid for what it was doing. It's basic.
It almost for a moment, you almost thought like maybe this isn't going to be terrible.
Yeah, you thought so. And then it opens immediately with all of them saying, all of these kids murdered their parents. Let's just let them not go to a place where they might get mental help because they are part of an evil cult. But rather, let's just immediately take them all into our homes because that's a normal thing to do after a massacre.
Well, just like it's a normal thing to do at the end of the film. What do we do with the children? Oh, just let them tell their stories and let the healing begin.
It makes no sense. What is I fucking hate it. It made no sense the whole time I'm watching this, just thinking, nobody in this film is acting like a normal human. This was written by, like, Johnny Number 5. Like, there's no fucking way this was written by a normal person.
I mean, it's like those memes you see on Twitter where it's like, I forced a neural network to blah, 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 and it generated the script.
Yes.
But done in the 90s. That is like what this script was.
I mean, we're getting into my dislike here with this, but since we're talking about this, I was reminded of Jimmy Sangster, the screenwriter of Curse of Frankenstein and a lot of other British horror films. His autobiography is called "Do You Want It Good or Tuesday?" And this film, I think it's a great title, but this film feels like its script. It came in on Monday, because the screenwriter, he's got some shit he wants to do on Tuesday, and it doesn't even feel quite like a first draft even. It's just like some point form ideas that they'll get around to at some point.
Yeah, that is really what it feels like. And I mean, you talk about the score, like I actually kind of complained about like the sound design that went with the score, where everything was like it's trying to indicate like everything when it's scary or it's supposed to be a jump scare or whatever. And I'm just like, they gave this movie to the poor sound people, and the sound people were like, well, I guess let's do our best to try to make this into something.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you we know a little bit of why that is. Why this film exists at all, because
did someone need a tax shelter?
Oh, that's very possible, but it was not in the trivia that I found.
Okay.
The main big trivia point, and I will say that this film is also extra boring because it does not have good trivia. The most mundane trivia it has is that apparently the father and son in this are born on the same day, exactly 22 years apart, which, cool, I guess.
Spooky.
But apparently Larry Kupin, who is the executive producer, I believe, of this film, was formerly of New World, which owns the rights to Korn, among other things like Hellraiser, and basically picked up the rights, started a company called Transatlantic Entertainment with the whole sole purpose of creating sequels to New World Picture films, which included Hellraiser 3, Children of the Corn 2, Wanted Dead or Alive 2, Angel 4, and Crimes of Passion. Those were the original intents, but the only sequels that ever got made was Hellraiser, Korn, and Angel 4.
And Hellraiser 3 would be the best of the bunch, and that's not saying a hell of a lot.
Yeah, I don't think Hellraiser gets better the longer it goes.
No. You have two good films, and then it goes downhill pretty fast. At least the third and the fourth did try some stuff, even if they didn't do it particularly well. But what you're describing there as well, I mean, the other thing that I think is at play here is, and this is something I was ranting about earlier, is that we're in a particularly bleak period, or entering rather a particularly bleak period for horror movies. Now, not as bleak as 1946 to 1951, where there are none made at all. Post the high point of Silence of the Lambs sweeping the Oscars, and then we do get some notable horror films, but just the sheer number of them dwindles enormously through into the mid 90s. And what we are also getting is these dregs, right? So the fact that Children of the Corn 2 is a sequel to a bad Stephen King adaptation. And in the middle of this period, we start getting a lot of really bad Stephen King adaptations, and most of them connected to his first short story collection, Night Shift, which gave us where some of the titles may sound familiar from that collection. Graveyard Shift, Children of the Corn, The Lawnmower Man. They are all, I gather, if memory serves, that he sold the rights relatively inexpensively. I mean, this was early in his career, and then suddenly all of these films started getting made. A couple in the 80s, like Children of the Corn, but then its sequel, those other bad ones, and The Mangler, all coming out in the 90s. A number of them still getting theatrical releases, I guess, because the Stephen King connection, but almost all of them excruciatingly bad.
I thought this was going to be a 25-minute lecture, David.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, no, it's going to be 40. So there's a whole bunch of other stuff. And hey, and I can go back and connect this to Jaws and Star Wars, explain why it's all their fault. But that we are looking at a period where there's so many horror films that if they either don't get released theatrically at all, or what you are getting is this kind of stuff, which it basically feels like you're wandering through the remainder bin of Blockbuster Video.
Gosh, that's saying something. Do you think that, honest question, David, do you think that the fact that this is a film that a Blockbuster might have carried in its remainder bin might be the reason Blockbuster died?
Well, it wouldn't be for another 20, 30 years, right? I mean,
that kind of financial loss is hard to recover from.
Except this wasn't a financial loss, remember? This was enormously profitable.
I know, what is happening?
But horror in the theaters was not. There were very few successful horror movies between in the mid 90s, and things start to turn around with Scream in 96, and then but the really big comeback is in 1999. So
right, with I think, as you had mentioned on Twitter, films that folks would have heard of, like Blair Witch, A Haunting, and other films like that.
Stir of Echoes, Sixth Sense, Haunting of Hill House, House on Haunted Hill.
Yeah.
So yeah, some good, some bad, but we have a huge comeback for horror in 1999. This film, I think, is kind of emblematic of the doldrums of the 90s. When you look back at the enormous creative explosion of the 70s, and then you hit a decline, certainly of in terms of low budget horror, the really interesting stuff starts to really taper off in the mid 80s as a result of the Blockbuster era. And here I'm not talking about the video store, but the industry state,
right?
That we are still in. And so you've got all these, so much of it that new product that did exist was just straight to video, and most of it, and so much of it really bad. And I mean, this film is a kind of borderline case, since it did have its theatrical release, but it feels like it should have gone straight to video.
It really, really does. I still just find it unbelievable that it actually went to theaters and that people actually went and saw it and then didn't tell their friends not to go. Y'all need better friends.
Y'all do need better friends. Okay, well, I have not given my like, so I think it's my turn before we switch over to dislikes. My like is really simple. My favorite death in this is the death of the Doctor. And that's largely because at the end of it, they all throw the suckers that he had given them, I guess, the same day or earlier that day or the day before, including one of the kids takes the wrapper off and shoves the sucker into his dead mouth before walking away. And I just adore that he actually got a death that, while probably not totally deserved, or maybe, I don't know, at least was a little bit funny and made an actual callback to the beginning of the film. I'm not going to suggest that it was cleverness on the part of the creators of this film, but at least they did one thing right.
That's what you get for being patronizing to kids.
Right?
And that's a really good point, because things like that and moments of, I emphasize moments involving Ned Romero's character, where you get the feeling that someone had an idea and that there was a point that was being made. And you there's like these brief seconds where you stop and go, oh, that was actually kind of clever, or at least it seems so. Are you going to go anywhere with this? And the answer is inevitably no. But in your example, Sean, we actually have the payoff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do want to mention, like, you mentioned Ned Romero's character. That is actually the second like that I wanted to mention. Because when you first meet him, and I don't remember what his first name is, just that he is Red Bear. He shows up and he talks to the dumb tabloid guy, and he's like, oh, I know these things about you. And the guy's like, oh, what? And he's like, yeah, don't leave your wallet in the car unattended, dummy. And then when he drives away, he's just like, well, if you need to get a hold of me, you can go to the university. I'm Dr. Red Bear. And I was like, that's so fucking cool. I can't believe this came out of the 90s, where they're like, oh, we're going to give you a Native American character played by a Native American actor, because Ed Romero is Native American, and he's going to be, like, not super stereotypical, and he's Dr. Red Bear, and he's an anthropologist, and okay, this is super cool. And then, like, 6 minutes later, the racism happens and just keeps happening for the rest of the movie.
It almost makes you wonder if it was like, it almost feels like different people writing it there, because, yeah, I mean, that moment, it feels like, okay, that's good, and like, almost all the best aspects of the writing involving his character comes out of the scene you just described.
Mm-hmm.
Because we also have that bit where our hero, Garrett, is saying, oh, is it, what are you implying? It was some sort of mysterious thing that caused those deaths? And Red Bear's answer is, no, a bunch of kids went apeshit and killed their parents.
Yeah, and then there's, like, a little bit of that later on when the two find, like, the barn full of the moldy corn, and Red Bear is like, oh, it's blah blah blah, and it has this effect, and it affects kids more, and you're like, oh, okay, he's giving the reasonable explanation. And it feels like those two scenes were written by an entirely different, much less racist person than the fucking scenes where then Dr. Red Bear is like, here is this bullshit Native American, like, legend that explains things, blah blah blah, and then, like, the fucking end scene, don't even get me started.
So that scene, by the way, was not originally part of the film. It was shot after the fact. Originally,
wait, which scene?
Yeah, the very end, when we have, like, Ghost Frank.
Oh,
Red
God.
Bear. Yeah. That scene was added in sort of last minute. Apparently, the original scene was going to have the reporter calling from a phone booth near a cornfield, presumably to his editor at his tabloid, talking about what, like, kind of what happened, and then he was to be swallowed up by the thing that lives in the cornfield.
Oh, that would have been way better.
Yeah, it would have been, but apparently they didn't have the budget for it, or something to that effect.
So, instead they were like, well, you know what has a lower budget? Racism.
Well, look, back in 1990...
And so that example you give of what the original ending was going to be, which we then didn't get, just makes me think that we may, perhaps, folks, have something unique. The only monster movie in the history of cinema where the monster falls through a plot hole.
It really does.
It does, yeah.
Because it's coming to the attack, and then then nothing happens. You never see it again.
And then we ran out of money, so it just kind of goes away.
Well, and it looks like they recycled some of the scenes from the original Korn.
which were bad to start with.
Yeah, so I think one of the corn rolling scenes and some of the clouds, I think, are maybe borrowed.
Yeah, the cloud. I don't remember. What was there a cloud in the first one? Oh, maybe there was.
I think there was.
My suspicion is that He Who Walks Behind the Rose, read the script, got on the horn to his agent and said, "Get me out of this."
Yeah, that seems a more likely outcome, I think, for this. So, well, we've been trashing the film, which seems like a good time for us to switch to dislikes. So, Alex, what's your first dislike?
I mean, I don't know. What I was going to use for my dislike was just like the fucking sound that's always like, a surprising thing has happened. Woo, it's scary. But I already kind of complained about that. So, and I also already complained about the racism that was very unfair to Ed Romero, who deserved so much better from this movie.
Truth.
As the only actual competent actor in the entire goddamn film. God. It's just so boring. Like, it's just such a boring movie, and it's so like incoherent because I mean there's like two entirely warring plot lines represented in Dr. Red Bear, where on one hand he's like, hey, this like psychoactive mold making the children go psycho and apeshit and murder their parents. Okay, and then on the other he's like, Native American legend, the kid, He Who Walks Behind the Rose, and I was like, really? So it's like, normally in movies like this, you'll have like the scientist character who's like, here is a reasonable explanation for the supernatural thing that's happening. And then you have like the crunchy granola person that's like, oh, spiritual blah, blah, blah. This is what's going on. I want to say this is actually the first time I've seen both of those characters shoved into the same character. And it was a very strange experience that I did not like.
Yeah, because they couldn't make up their minds which it was going to be.
Yeah. And then, but I did, to be fair, I did already kind of complain about that, so I will come up with a fresh like, or a fresh dislike. So, like, the kid with the black hair that they dressed all in black because John Franklin had a much better agent than any of the other people in this movie, and they took one look at this and went, oh no. And so instead they just, like, picked some kid up off the basketball court at the local high school and gave him a bad dye job and some ill-fitting clothes. And they were like, you're wearing black, which indicates that you will be the evil one. So, like, what the fuck was that entire, like, weird-ass CGI sequence where he explodes into bubbles and then gets attacked by other bubbles?
Man, I'm sorry I didn't see that.
Has, like, a modulated voice thing that he can do afterward? Like, yeah. What was up with that?
So, David, you didn't get this?
No, all I got was when he first, he gets tracked by, presumably He Who Walks Behind the Rose when he's in the cornfield, and then he emerges with to take over the cult with that modulated voice, which I never heard again.
Oh, wow. Okay, so it comes up again for us. And Alex is talking about this really bizarre CG scene, which somewhat comes back later, where it appears, I guess, that he's sort of going through some sort of transformation with the he who stands behind the rose or walks behind or whatever the hell its dumb name is.
The corn dude.
The corn dude monster. Yeah, corn. Yeah, that's right. The corn dude. Right. He definitely thinks that it's just your opinion. So there's that, and then later on his like face morphs temporarily into
when he's just getting sucked into the combine.
Right, yeah, it morphs and then it like unmorphs and then it becomes regular Micah again. And then
it doesn't morph and then unmorph, it like morphs and then explodes and then it's regular Micah and then he gets sucked into the combine.
Right, and then he dies.
That I did see.
Okay,
that
so
I did
got
see.
that. Yeah, so I guess what they were trying to go for and failed horribly is that he's being taken over by Corn Dude, Big Lebowski Corn Dude, but it doesn't make any sense because it's this surreal, like very 90s CG ridiculousness
that is of such low quality it could not have even made it into Lawnmower Man.
Right, and that's really telling. And I just don't. I when I watched it, I was like, oh, apparently we're all on drugs now because that's the only explanation for what's happening. But I think what they're going for is just simply that they're trying to suggest that he like internally has been taken over by Big Lebowski corn dude, and then that's why his voice is modulated. But apparently, for David's version, his voice modulates only the once, and for the rest of us, it like slips in and out a bit. It kind of there are times when his voice is a little normal, but then when he gets really worked up, it definitely modulates.
I feel really bad for this kid because he's obviously trying his hardest to be John Franklin, and he is no John Franklin.
And I'm so glad you brought him up because the look he had, and I know I'm really going to date myself here, but I kept feeling like the cult was being led by Alfalfa from the Little Rascals.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
Oh no.
Also, can I just say, to me, it never, like, the whole time I'm watching this, it never made any sense why nobody meets Micah and doesn't immediately think something is off here. Like,
he's the only kid who's all in black. He's like the token goth.
In Nebraska.
When all the kids, like when the old lady's pointing at those kids are weird, and our hero looks at these all of these kids in their Oshkosh and the one goth just standing absolutely motionless and staring, and our hero just goes, okay, whatever.
Right?
Sees nothing odd about them.
Like nobody even when they've murdered all their parents in the beginning, and so we get immediately after where all the kids are being put on the bus, and they're like totally silent, staring forward, not responding. They're not upset, nothing. And everyone just thinks, oh, they're just a bunch of like poor kids who had a bad weekend. Like nobody is like looking at these kids and going, no, there is something wrong here. These kids are messed up. They have had either an ordeal or they are straight up like Omen level evil. And nobody wants to seem to talk about honestly, when you get to the end of this film, you just think to yourself, the adults got what was coming to them.
Oh yeah, they were too dumb to live. And I do want to mention, since the corn dude, there was this one extremely odd moment with the kid Danny, right? Where like it's when his dad is fucking the bed and breakfast lady.
Oh god.
And I guess Danny realizes and he walks away from it, and I don't even remember what the line is, but I just remember the word
sinning vigorously.
It was like most, and he used the word most in it, and I was like,
yes.
It sounded like Bill and Ted for a second. It was really weird.
Well, all right. So Alex, I think you got your dislike out, yeah?
Yes, I have cleansed myself.
So David, we have now turned to you. Give us your dislike, sir.
Basically springing out of what we've already talked about, which is the script. But I guess I want to focus on one particular example, which I think is emblematic of a whole of at least one particular facet of this diamond of shit that is the screenplay. And this is when the old lady gets squished by the house, and we get the Wizard of Oz reference with her legs sticking out.
Oh my god. That was almost funny. It was trying to be funny, and it just wasn't. And I was so disappointed.
And so let's look at this, right? So first, where we see her under the house, she apparently is into the middle of the house, so it makes no sense for her legs to be sticking out from the wall for us to get the Wicked Witch of the East reference. Secondly, but okay, let's set that aside. What the fuck is this Wizard of Oz reference doing there? It connects to nothing.
Right.
It's just there. And then it's also part of the problems with the murders, because sometimes the murders are just the other kids doing a mean thing, like releasing the whatever those hoists were that were holding the house up. Sometimes the deaths are supernatural, as in the corn impaling of the journalist in the early on, or when Alfalfa/Micah is carving his Nebraska voodoo doll in the church, and we get our kind of scanners explosion of the random parishioner.
Right.
And then other times it's back to the mundane with the gasoline and the and so on. So there's no connection to anything, and so like
you're forgetting one.
The old lady with the remote control wheelchair.
Right, where they become basically like hackers.
Yeah, which is neither here nor there. And though I do have to say, respect for the the blatant cheese of the scene of her being catapulted through the window and the guy still claiming bingo on his card.
That was so bad. It was just like a manic. Oh God, it was so bad.
It was so bad. And again, this moment where they try to go for the humor in a film that hasn't really tried to do that. So all of these things, just I guess if we take as the core this Wizard of Oz reference that connects to nothing, for me is a symbol of the entire movie, where any scene that you look at doesn't connect to anything else.
It's like a sequence of vignettes that they just strung together loosely into a story.
Yeah, and almost like bad improv or something like that, where we again, where I keep coming back to this idea of the script as a rough draft. Like nobody decided to go back and reread what they'd written.
Yeah, I mean, it's really weird because this film, as I'd mentioned before, has this moment, right, with the doctor where they make a clear callback, so there's a clear connection. But so much of the film's deaths and so on are just... There's no, like, this leads to this leads to this. Like, there's a clear endpoint beyond we're just killing. Nothing feels connected to anything. It all feels like someone sat down and, like, what are some unique ways we can kill someone? But unlike Saw, the Saw franchise, where it tries to connect each of the deaths specifically to the character's presumed weaknesses or what Jigsaw perceives to be their vices, these are just, like, the woman, the house falls on her. Well, why does the house fall on her? Well, only because we're going to make a Wizard of Oz reference. Or the guy gets killed by corn. Well, why do they get killed by corn? Well, because it involves corn and they got lost in a cornfield because for some reason reporters just drive on a random grass road in the middle of a cornfield because that's what reporters do, apparently. All of these deaths, with the exception of the doctor, don't connect to really anything. And then even when we get something which seems like it might be a connection, which is when they lock all the people in the house and they say the good children of Gatlin or whatever have barred the door, which is a hilarious line.
Yes.
And then they light it on fire and kill them all. Like, that's only because we've just, like, moments before learned that the adults have been plotting something, but we still don't understand what the dumbass plot is. We don't, like, what is the plot? Like, they're poisoning America with a psychoactive corn? Like, none of it makes any sense.
They just want to get two big harvests, and they're disguising the previously poisoned harvest with the good harvest. So it's not even an ambitious conspiracy.
Is that what they're doing?
Yeah, no, that's literally it. Is they're plotting to, like, kind of mix the bad corn and the good corn so they can just sell it all so they don't have to eat a bad harvest.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's it.
And that's enough of a thing for the sheriff to, like, try to run the tabloid reporter and Dr. Red Bear over with a combine.
Right, which does at least come back at the end because a combine apparently ran through 400 miles of cornfield and then showed up at the end.
Chekhov's combine.
Yeah.
Right.
But what you're saying about the like, again, with the thing with the kids, just made me think of, I think one of the reasons why the film doesn't follow through is you see the problem, and you see this with the original film too as well. Like, relatively mainstream American movies are not going to be able to follow through on the plot consequences of having killer kids. Like, how do you stop them, right? Are you going to have the adults gun them down? No. You're going to have them throw a few punches and then the kids disappear from the movie and we have the line about let the healing begin, right?
Yeah,
so,
I mean, it's such cowardice in a way.
I mean, if you look at much either European films like Who Would Kill a Child or independent American films like Devil Times 5, there, and if you've got like the really evil kids, well, you get genuinely dark films, whereas this is just beige.
Yeah, because I mean, the thing is, when you come down to the premise of, like, this cult of children that kills their parents and they're basically unstoppable unless you fucking murder them, which is like kind of the point. Like, that's actually a really good horror setup because then you do have to ask yourself, like, you know, at what price do you stop them or can you stick them all in an asylum? But then they'll probably plot an escape or whatever. But instead the movie's just like, so we banished the deity we made up and everything will be fine. Which is just, it's so cowardly.
It is, and it's weird because it's the 1990s. Like, For fuck's sake, they had psychiatry.
Well, and what is really, I mean, I get, when was this made in the 90s? Because was this before?
1992 is probably when they
Oh,
filmed
okay,
it.
because I was okay. That was before Columbine. But then, on the other hand, there had been other instances before that of children murdering other children in school shootings. So that's a thing that's in the consciousness of child murderers. Like,
I mean, cults had been part of the public consciousness. There have been tons
yeah.
of very high-profile cults preceding this.
yeah, and instead they were just like, it'll be fine. There is so much wrong with that script that it probably can't be saved. But if you could only change one thing to try to fix a lot of what was wrong with the movie, the one thing I would change is at the beginning when they go pick up the kids, it's that no one knows the kids fucking murdered the adults. Then so much more makes sense.
Right, like maybe you hide that fact, and that's the mystery that all the other adults are in on, not the corn bullshit.
Yeah.
Who cares about that? That's a nothing burger.
I was kind of impressed, wrongly as it turned out, that they were picking up almost, like exactly in the wake of the first film. Like sure, we're making it 8 years later, but okay. So they it seems like the logical consequence to the slaughter that occurred in the previous film. So the media descends, and the authorities are having to deal with this. It's like, okay, well, this is actually kind of interesting. And then it turned into the nothing burger, like you said. So that moment of interest turned out to be another flaw.
Yeah.
So or I mean, or I thought where it was going to go was like, okay, the town dealing with the kids they've taken in, and you can see how you could get a story out of that.
Yeah.
But that turned out not to be the story that anyone was interested in writing. So it becomes another point form idea that we could do this, or maybe we could go and do this instead. Or maybe it could be about mold.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing, like, at the beginning where it just really, you're immediately like, oh, this is going off the rails, is you're like, oh, okay, in the media and all that, and then the old lady shows up, and she's basically like, are you people fucking insane? They murdered their parents! They're evil! I don't want them in the town. If you insist on bringing them into the town, I'm gonna pick up my entire house and leave, which was like, what? But, like, she is treated by the movie, like the way they film her, as like this shrill harpy that is a creature of ridicule, when you're like, she's the only one who's saying anything fucking sensible.
Right. Also, I didn't understand, why kill her? She's literally leaving. Just let her take her damn house.
And then they made up a sister for her so that they could kill another little old lady. I don't know. I feel like maybe the scriptwriter was like working through some issues. I don't know.
Like, are they killing the adults because they've poisoned the earth, or are they killing them because they're going to somehow create problems for? Like, there's no consistency in that. There's no through line to anything. You can't explain why anything happens.
Mm-hmm.
It just does, or more often doesn't, from scene to scene.
It's nonsensical.
It's a nonsensical film. That's not my dislike. I realize I have not given my dislike at all.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've thoroughly covered this one, so yeah, you gotta come up with something else.
Oh, no, don't worry. I have one that we have not talked about yet, and David may not know exists because there are two versions of this film, and David may have seen the version where this doesn't happen, but I almost noped out of this film hard when they murdered the cat.
Didn't happen in my version. No cat shows up at all. Oh, no, there's a cat, but the cat is just safely removed from under the house, and we never see the cat
Not
again.
in my version. They snap its neck.
So the one thing I will say, Sean, to the credit of the movie, is that you do not see it. It's just like the cat makes a noise, and you're like, okay, they murdered the cat, and it's not like you had to see a quote-unquote dead cat, which would have made me fucking nope out. Because, like, that's where the Babadook almost lost me.
I would normally agree, but, like, my tolerance level for animal murder in films is, like, at an extra low. And so
I don't blame you.
So that's, like, I guess I could have handled it if they left it ambiguous, but when they had it, like, there was a neck crunch in mine.
Oh yeah, no, they totally fucking murdered the cat. It made, like, a cat rare noise, and then there was a snap, and I was like, ooh.
But see, this is another thing. Like, why? Like, because there's this whole bit in this, which is, like, they're about preserving the earth, right? And, like, the adults have ruined the earth, and so we want to bring the earth, we're going to murder all the adults and bring the earth, I guess, to some sort of more natural state.
Yeah, but why would they kill the cat?
But the cat's not doing anything. The the cat is completely innocent, right? The cat's just doing cat shit, just running around, laying on the couch, occasionally getting on the cabinets when it's not supposed to, right? Things like that. And so why kill the cat except as a way of being cruel to the old lady? But you already are being cruel to the old lady because you're going to slowly lower the house on top of her and kill her. So to me, like, not only do I just hate when they murder animals in movies, I just can't do it anymore. Like, I can't handle it. For me, it's just like I'm done. I hate it. But they do it and it doesn't actually serve any purpose, except just to make the kids, I guess, seem like more like assholes.
Yeah.
Don't murder cats. If you are a cat murderer, I will probably not hunt you down and do bad things to you like in Taken, but I will be very tempted.
He has a special set of skills.
Right.
And can we just, though, I think we, in fairness, we do have to add, to this scene, which we've have discussed now at some length, as all the ways in which it is bad, but there is the one good thing about it, or at least the bit that made me laugh, which is the old lady's final words, which are, what a world, what a
Yes!
world, repeated several times. And I really wanted her to add the word wonderful and burst into song.
I mean, it was obviously just an extension of the Wizard of Oz reference that just came out of nowhere, and I was like, you're not even in the right fucking state, but...
Fair enough. All right, well, I think we have thoroughly destroyed this film. We got to get to final thoughts and grades, so I throw this to Alex. Your final thoughts and grade, please.
God. So this movie was definitely a waste of like an hour and a half of my life that was only ameliorated by the fact that I was like cuddling with my cats the entire time. And I ate some popcorn because that felt appropriate, but it really wasn't. I don't know. Like, I'm not going to say that this is the worst thing we've ever watched for torture cinema, because we've watched some ones that actively made me angry, and just instead of me just being like, oh God, this is a waste of celluloid, or, in this case, bits streaming through the internet. But oh God, it was bad, y'all. It made no sense, and Ned Romero deserved so much better than this movie gave him. Oh, and I have to give it a grade, right? It's a D- for deeply disappointing. A double D.
Deeply disappointing. The special Alex grade.
Yes.
Perfect. All right, then we throw it to you, David. Final thoughts and grade, please.
Oh, it's funny, Alex, you should have mentioned cuddling with your cats as a way to get through it, because my dog Rosie realized how much I was suffering, and she came up to me with her plushy snake that squeaks as snakes do, and engaged me in a game of tug-of-war with that and the hedgehog that goes honk in order to get me through this. And we basically did tug-of-war for most of the film. So thank you, Rosie, for preserving my sanity and getting me through this film. And yeah, I mean, everything that you said, it's good dog. It's just, I mean, it's just so tedious. The sad thing is that it doesn't, it's not like other films, including from that era, but in many others before, which which are so bad that you cannot tear your eyes away, that they are riveting, that in many cases you may prefer to watch them again than watch something good. I can think, there are more films than I care to name that where I would watch them over any Oscar winner you could name, practically. But this is not one of them. It's just blah. It's just so boring. You're right that Ned Romero deserved better, and partly because when he does show up, the movie manages to liven up sometimes. And the little bits and pieces that it does throws, the little fragmentary bones that we get to chew on, it's still not the absolute nadir of the form. So yeah, it's a D- from me too.
Very much on board there. So in terms of my final thoughts and grade, then, I'd echo a lot of what you said. Yeah, it's a pretty boring film. Most of this film, just really, all you need to do is see the first 5 minutes, and you're good to know what you need to know about this film. Because the first 5 minutes, I spent essentially going, what the ever-loving fuck is going on? Because none of it makes any sense at all. And it drives me nuts, because this whole film just wouldn't exist if it just followed any vague sense of realism. That said, as David and Alice have pointed out, this film is unintentionally an allegory for COVID times, and so unfortunately, this is the reality we live in. So I did not enjoy this film.
The dumbest reality. The dumbest, most poorly written reality.
It is. I think if I was a teenager, I would be like, oh, the girl's cute. And that might have been all I got out of this. But since I'm 37 now, I just mostly felt like my time was wasted. And thanks a lot, guys, for picking this. So is it the worst film we've ever watched? No, but you know what? That's not saying a lot because we've watched some really, truly retro films. So I will also give it a D-.
We are in accord.
Alrighty, well, we're at the end here, so just as a reminder, if you want to find me, you can find me at Sean Duke on Twitter, or SeanDuke.net on my website. Alex, where can folks find you?
So I'm at Katsu Donbury, like the food, on Twitter, and my website is katsudon.net or alexx.com.
Perfect. And David, what about you?
And you can find me on Twitter at David_Annandale.
In terms of the Skiffy and Fanty Show, if you want to find us, skiffyandfanty.com, at Skiffy and Fanty on Twitter, / Skiffy and Fanty on Facebook. You can also get our newsletter run by Stephen Geigen Miller at skiffyandfanty.com/newsletter. We also are on YouTube at youtube.com/skiffyandfanty. And obviously support us on Patreon, where you can vote on Torture Cinema polls, such as the one that selected this film, you bastards. You can go to patreon.com/skiffyandfanty to vote on that. There's other perks and things if you'd like to do that. So thanks again, Alex and David, for being on with me for this nonsense. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
Yep. And I will just note that, as I've been telling many people in this time of COVID, that you don't have to wear pants if you are doing anything at all in remote times. However, please don't touch yourself while you are in professional meetings.
I apparently it's a very difficult thing for certain sectors of the population, but yes, you can do it. I believe in you.
Yeah, it's really not that hard. You know what you do? You just not go in the call, and then you go to Pornhub and you touch yourself on your own time.
So stay safe.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
And on that note, awkward ending and scene.
That was very awkward. You are welcome, citizen.
If you would like to support this podcast, you can do so at patreon.com/skiffyandfanty. You can also find us on our website, skiffyandfanty.com, and on Twitter at skiffyandfanty. If you'd like to send us an email, you can do so at skiffyandfanty@gmail.com. The music for this episode comes from Sphere by Creo. You can find out more about their music at freemusicarchive.org.